You ever notice how quiet the room gets when someone brings up your past? It's almost like time pauses. Every mistake, every regret, every moment you wish you could redo suddenly stands in front of you again. And right there, someone tries to use it as a weapon to remind you of who you were. But here's what you say: that version of me doesn't live here anymore. I say it calmly, not defensively, not in anger, just with truth. Because when you've healed, you don't argue with the version of yourself that no longer exists. You acknowledge it. You honor it, but you don't live there anymore. See, people who bring up your past are often trying to anchor you to a place you've already been freed from. They're uncomfortable with your growth because it reminds them of their own stagnation. And when you respond from peace instead of pain, you shift the power dynamic entirely. You show them that your identity isn't up for debate. You're not hiding who you were. You're simply done being defined by it. That's strength, not the loud kind that needs to shout, but the kind that stands still in truth and says, yes, that was me, but look at me now. Because emotional detachment isn't coldness, it's clarity. It's knowing the difference between who you were, who they think you are, and who you've become. Detachment means you've stopped performing for approval. You've stopped explaining your transformation to people committed to misunderstanding it. When they say, but remember when you did this, you say, yes, and that's exactly how I learned what I know now. You see, wisdom is built from wounds. Every scar you carry is not shame. It's evidence that you healed. You've faced your reflection, forgiven yourself, and made peace with your past. There's nothing left for them to use against you. And here's the truth: when your peace is real, it intimidates people who depend on chaos to feel powerful. They'll push buttons just to see if you still react the way you used to. But the person you've become doesn't need to prove anything. Your silence will speak louder than their accusation. Your calm will unsettle their control. So when someone uses your past against you, take a breath, look them in the eye and say, thank you for reminding me how far I've come, because that's what they just did. They confirmed your growth. What they meant for guilt, you turned into gratitude. What they used as a weapon, you turned into wisdom. And the moment you can look at your past without flinching, you've already won. Your past is not a prison. It's a classroom. Every moment you've lived, every mistake you've made, every painful lesson that left a mark on your soul, all of it was preparing you for something greater. The problem is, most people treat their past off like a life sentence instead of a learning space. They replay old memories, relive old wounds, and let guilt become their teacher instead of wisdom. But the truth is, your past was never designed to confine you. It was meant to refine you. It's where you discovered your resilience, where you learned who you were when the mask fell off, where you saw how strong your spirit could be when life stripped everything else away. The moments you regret are often the very moments that built your discernment. You don't gain wisdom from perfection, you gain it from pain, from loss, from realization. The lesson isn't in what went wrong, it's in how you rose from it. The past can't hold you unless you keep revisiting the door and locking it from the inside. Freedom comes when you start seeing your past as your greatest teacher instead of your worst enemy. It taught you boundaries. It taught you empathy. It taught you the value of peace because you remember what it felt like to live without it. And when someone tries to use your past against you, they're trying to drag you back into a classroom you've already graduated from. You don't need to retake lessons you've already mastered. You simply acknowledge them and keep walking forward. You can thank your past for the lessons, but you owe it no more rent in your mind, because what once broke you now builds you. What once embarrassed you now empowers you. Growth is a sign that you've stopped identifying with your old self. You've evolved beyond the decisions made by a person who didn't yet know what you know now. The classroom of your past gave you wisdom that textbooks can't teach: humility, patience, compassion, and strength. And the more you accept it as part of your story, the less control it has over your future. You are not the mistakes you made. You are the person who learned from them, rose through them, and turned them into light. People who use your past against you are still living in it. You've simply moved on to a higher floor of awareness. When someone tries to remind you of who you used to be, it's not really about you. It's about where they are stuck. They speak from the level they understand, and if their perspective is still trapped in your history, it's because they haven't updated their understanding of your growth. You've moved forward, evolved, healed, and changed, but they keep referencing a version of you that no longer exists. It's like they're still standing on the ground floor, talking about the cracks in the foundation while you're already living in the penthouse of transformation. When you grow in wisdom, your energy shifts, your priorities change, and your spirit becomes lighter. But not everyone can rise with you. Some people can only see you through the lens of your past mistakes because your evolution threatens their comfort. They feel safer keeping you where they last understood you. They might say you used to be this, or don't forget where you came from, as if your past defines your worth. But what they fail to realize is that remembering your past and being ruled by it are two different things. You can honor where you came from without staying trapped there. Growth often intimidates those who haven't faced their own reflection. When you change, it exposes what they've been avoiding. That's why they reach for your history. It's the only version of you they can compete with. But when you've matured spiritually, you don't argue with their perception. You simply let them speak while you keep your peace. Because when you know who you are, their words lose power. You stop defending yourself, not because you're guilty, but because you're free. You see, your past might be a chapter in your story, but it's not the whole book. Those who use it against you are quoting from old pages, ignoring the fact that you've written several new ones since then. You don't need to prove your growth to anyone still living in yesterday. Let them talk. Let them stay where they are, because you've climbed higher, not in arrogance, but in awareness. And when you reach that level, you understand something deeper. They're not your enemy. They're simply evidence of how far you've come. True confidence is silent acceptance of your own story without needing validation, defense, or permission. It's the kind of peace that comes when you no longer need to convince anyone that you've changed, healed, or grown. You stop explaining your worth because you finally understand that it was never up for negotiation. Real confidence doesn't shout, it settles. It's the quiet knowing that everything you've walked through has a purpose, even if others can't see it. You don't need to correct every false perception or justify every chapter of your past. The truth doesn't demand attention, it simply stands firm and lets time reveal what words cannot. Confidence rooted in peace is unshakable. It doesn't rise or fall based on who approves of you. It comes from owning your past, not erasing it. When you reach that place within yourself, your energy shifts. You stop reacting to judgment, gossip, or opinions because your focus is no longer on defending your image, it's on protecting your peace. People may try to remind you of who you used to be, but when you've accepted your story, their words no longer sting. They're just echoes from a life you've already outgrown. The world teaches you to prove yourself, to be loud about your achievements, to show that you're better than your mistakes. But confidence doesn't need to prove. It simply is. It's that calm awareness that says, I know who I am, I know what I've overcome, and I don't need your approval to validate it. That's not pride, it's alignment. It's when your heart, mind, and soul all agree that you've made peace with yourself. And when you reach that level of acceptance, you become untouchable. Not because you're flawless, but because you've made peace with your flaws. You no longer shrink when people whisper your past, because you've already had those conversations with yourself in silence. You've forgiven, healed, and learned, and no one can take that away from you. The need for validation fades when you realize you were never seeking approval from others. You were seeking reconciliation with yourself. Once that happens, every attempt to discredit you becomes powerless, because true confidence doesn't live in the applause. It lives in the quiet, unshakable certainty that you are enough exactly as you are. When you are anchored in purpose, other people's opinions lose their ability to shake your peace. The moment you truly understand why you're here and what you're called to do, the noise around you starts to fade. Opinions, criticism, and judgment become like wind against a mountain, present but powerless. Purpose gives you direction, and direction gives you clarity. Once you have clarity, you stop chasing approval. You stop bending yourself to fit the comfort of others. You begin to move with intention instead of insecurity, because you know your value doesn't come from people's applause. It comes from divine assignment. When you're anchored in purpose, your heart becomes steady. You no longer panic when misunderstood, because your validation doesn't live in understanding. It lives in conviction. You stop explaining your every move, because purpose doesn't require permission. It simply requires obedience to what's right for your soul. There's a quiet strength that comes from knowing that you're walking a path meant for you, not for the crowd. And once you realize that, you stop shrinking to fit other people's narratives. People will always have something to say. Some will question your motives. Others will doubt your growth. But their perspective isn't your truth. The only reason opinions once had power over you is because you hadn't yet learned to stand in your purpose. When you know your why, what can't touch you. You begin to understand that rejection, misunderstanding, and criticism are not signs of failure. They're signs that you're no longer playing small. You've stepped into alignment, and alignment will always make the insecure uncomfortable. Peace doesn't come from being liked. It comes from being rooted. Purpose is that root. It keeps you grounded when storms of opinion try to sway your identity. It reminds you that not everyone is supposed to understand your path because it wasn't revealed to them. It was revealed to you. And the deeper you're anchored in that truth, the free you become. You stop reacting to every comment, every judgment, every attempt to pull you back. Because when your life is built on purpose, opinions become background noise, and your peace becomes unshakable. That's when you truly start to live, not for approval, but for meaning. Emotional detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop surrendering your peace to other people's projections. It's not coldness, it's clarity. It's the quiet discipline of choosing calm over chaos and understanding that not every reaction deserves your energy. When you master detachment, you stop letting other people's moods, opinions, and behaviors dictate your state of mind. You recognize that what they project onto you often has more to do with their own unhealed wounds than with your truth. Detachment is the art of staying centered in your own peace even when the world around you tries to pull you into emotional warfare. People often misunderstand detachment as indifference, but it's actually the opposite. It's love with boundaries. It's compassion without self-sacrifice. It's being able to say, I can care deeply about you, but I won't lose myself in the process. When you're emotionally entangled with everyone's approval or disapproval, you lose control of your own inner balance. But detachment gives you the space to see things clearly. It teaches you to respond, not react, to observe, not absorb. You stop personalizing other people's pain, and instead of defending yourself against their projections, you learn to let silence do the talking. This kind of emotional strength comes from knowing who you are. You stop needing others to confirm your worth because you've already found it within yourself. You stop chasing closure from people who were never capable of giving it, and you stop explaining your intentions to those committed to misunderstanding them. Detachment isn't avoidance, it's emotional maturity. It's knowing when to engage and when to step back, when to speak, and when to let peace answer for you. The power of detachment is that it restores your focus. When you're no longer drained by what doesn't belong to you, have energy for what truly matters, your purpose, your growth, your joy, you begin to see that peace is not something others can give or take. It's something you protect from within. The moment you stop handing over your peace to people's projections, you step into true freedom. That's when you stop being reactive and start being radiant, because nothing external can shake what's anchored in inner stability. Spiritual maturity is when your past no longer triggers guilt, but gratitude. It's that deep inner shift where you stop wishing certain things hadn't happened and start realizing they were necessary for your becoming. Every mistake, every heartbreak, every failure begins to make sense in the language of divine timing. You look back and see that even the pain had purpose. The shame that once haunted you turns into wisdom that now guides you. You no longer see your past as something to run from, but something to thank because it introduced you to the strength you didn't know you had. When you're spiritually immature, you carry your past like a weight. You replay moments in your mind, wondering what you could have done differently. You punish yourself with what ifs and if onlys. But as you grow in awareness, you realize that guilt keeps you chained to a version of yourself that no longer exists. Gratitude, on the other hand, sets you free. It turns the narrative from, I shouldn't have done that, to I learned from that. You stop resenting the process that shaped you and begin to see it as sacred preparation. Spiritual maturity is the point where forgiveness becomes your default posture, especially toward yourself. You no longer define yourself by your lowest moments. You understand that healing doesn't mean forgetting, it means remembering differently. You see your scars not as evidence of brokenness, but as proof of healing. You stop hiding your past because you recognize that it carries the fingerprints of transformation. Every painful lesson, every disappointment, every detour, it all worked together to refine you, not to ruin you. Gratitude shifts your vision. Instead of seeing your past as a series of wrong turns, you start to see divine redirection. Instead of guilt for who you were, you feel appreciation for who you've become. This kind of gratitude doesn't erase the memory of pain. It redeems it. It transforms regret into revelation. You begin to understand that nothing was wasted, not the tears, not the silence, not the waiting. Everything served your evolution. And that's the beauty of spiritual maturity. You reach a place where you can look back without flinching, because what once felt like loss now looks like grace in disguise. Forgiving yourself is not weakness, it's the doorway to power, because you reclaim control over the narrative. The hardest person to forgive is often the one you see in the mirror. We carry the weight of our own mistakes far longer than anyone else ever could, rehearsing them in silence, punishing ourselves with guilt disguised as accountability. But forgiveness isn't saying what happened was okay. It's saying you're no longer letting it define who you are. It's choosing to stop reliving the moment you fell and instead focus on the strength it took to rise. When you forgive yourself, you take back authority from shame. You stop letting your past sit in the driver's seat of your present. True forgiveness is freedom. It's releasing the version of yourself that didn't know better, the one who acted out of fear, pain, or confusion. You acknowledge that person with compassion instead of condemnation. Because every bad decision was made by someone who hadn't yet learned the lesson you know now. You can't become wise without walking through ignorance first. You can't embody grace without having needed it. Forgiving yourself means you've accepted that growth was always part of the process, even when the path looked messy. When you hold on to self-blame, you give power to a moment that's already over. You let a past version of you dictate the peace of your present self. But when you release it, everything changes. Your energy lightens. Your heart opens. You stop needing to prove your worth because you've already reconciled it within. Forgiveness turns regret into reflection and shame into strength. It's not about erasing the past. It's about rewriting its meaning. The truth is, no one else's forgiveness can free you if you haven't forgiven yourself first. You can receive apologies, validation, even grace from others, but if you're still at war with your own spirit, peace won't stay. Forgiveness is self-leadership. It's saying, I'm done being the villain in my own story. It's reclaiming your dignity from the moments you wish you could change. When you finally forgive yourself, you stop running from your reflection. You look at who you were, who you are, and who you're becoming, and you bless them all because each version played a role in your becoming whole. You can't be free and still chained to what you've already been delivered from. Freedom isn't just about walking away from the past. It's about refusing to keep revisiting it in your mind. So many people claim they've moved on, but deep down, they're still emotionally tied to what once hurt them. They've left the situation, but not the mindset. Real freedom is internal. It's when you no longer allow old memories to dictate how you feel about yourself today. It's when you stop identifying with pain and start identifying with purpose. Because as long as you keep rehearsing the past, you're still giving it a seat at the table of your future. Every time you dwell on what broke you, you strengthen the chains that held you. But when you choose to release it, not suppress it, but truly release it, you take your power back. The truth is, you can't carry the weight of the old and expect to step into the new. Healing requires letting go of the identity that came from surviving. It means realizing that you are no longer that person who endured the hurt, made that mistake, or lived through that chaos. You've evolved beyond it. The past can only follow you if you keep turning around to look for it. Freedom is not forgetting. It's remembering without reliving. It's the peace that comes when the memory no longer controls your emotions. It's knowing you can visit your past for wisdom, but you don't have to stay there for residency. When you've truly been delivered from something, you stop defending it, you stop explaining it, and you stop trying to fix what's already finished. You let it rest and you let yourself rise. The most dangerous form of bondage is invisible. It's emotional attachment to what no longer serves your growth. It's that quiet loyalty to your old story, the one where you were broken, guilty, or not enough. But the moment you understand that your deliverance was meant to be permanent, you stop entertaining the lies that keep you small. Small, you stop reopening doors God already closed. Freedom means walking in alignment with who you've become, not who you used to be. And when you finally choose to live there, you realize that nothing from your past has permission to chain you, unless you give it the key. When you no longer react to those who weaponize your past, you expose their insecurity, not your own history. There's a sacred kind of strength in silence, the kind that unsettles those who expect you to defend yourself. When someone tries to use your past as a weapon, they're hoping to trigger the old version of you, the one that needed to be understood, the one that felt the need to explain or justify. But when you've healed, you don't take the bait. You stand firm in your growth, and your calm becomes the loudest response. You show them that their words no longer have access to your emotions. That's not arrogance, it's authority over your own peace. You see, people only use your past against you when they're threatened by your present. They reach for old chapters because they can't handle the new one you're writing. It's a way of trying to level the playing field, to remind you of who you were so they can avoid facing who you've become. But when you no longer react, when you remain steady, you strip their control. You reveal that their power was always rooted in your reaction. Once you take that away, they're left confronting their own insecurity. Your calm becomes conviction. Your silence becomes evidence that you've outgrown the battlefield. You've realized that not every comment deserves an answer. Not every accusation deserves a defense. The person you are now understands that truth doesn't need to shout. It stands firm, unmoved, because it knows its own validity. When you've healed, you can listen to lies about your past and feel nothing but peace, because you know the difference between history and identity. Emotional maturity is learning that peace is more powerful than proof. The moment you stop explaining yourself, you begin protecting yourself. You stop feeding energy to arguments that don't serve your evolution. Let people say what they need to say. It's a reflection of their need to feel relevant in a story that no longer includes them. You owe no reaction, no justification, no defense, because your growth speaks louder than your words ever could. When you remain unshaken by the echoes of your past, you make one thing unmistakably clear: you've healed beyond their reach. The only person with authority to define you is the one who created you, not the one who criticizes you. Every opinion spoken about you comes from a limited perspective. People can only see you through the lens of their own understanding, and that lens is often blurred by their own fears, insecurities, and biases. That's why you can't build your identity on human approval. It shifts too easily. One day they applaud you, the next they doubt you. But when you anchor your worth in something higher, in something divine, you stop seeking definition from people who didn't design you. You realize that the same voices that criticize you today might celebrate you tomorrow, and neither changes who you truly are. When you let others define you, you live like a mirror, reflecting whatever image they project onto you. But when you know who you are at the core, when you're connected to your creator, you become a light radiating from within, not reflecting from without. You move differently because you understand that purpose doesn't need permission. You no longer shape your identity to fit the expectations of those around you. You stop explaining your worth to those who can't comprehend it, because you finally know that their understanding is not required for your assignment to be fulfilled. Criticism will always come, but it loses power when you recognize its source. People often criticize what they don't understand or what reminds them of their own unfulfilled potential. Their words are more about their wounds than your worth. So when someone questions who you are, you don't internalize it, you observe it. You let it pass through without piercing your peace, because your identity isn't something that can be taken from you. It's something that was spoken into from the beginning. Living from divine definition gives you stability in a world obsessed with validation. You become unshakable, not because life stops testing you, but because you know who you are regardless of what comes. You stop chasing labels and start walking in truth. When you're defined by the one who made you, no opinion, rumor, or rejection can rewrite that truth. You carry quiet authority because you know this. People can describe you, but only purpose can define you. So when someone uses your past against you, remember this: it's not your job to defend your evolution. You're not here to convince anyone that you've changed. You're here to live as proof that you did. The ones who speak from your history are still standing in it, while you've already stepped into your destiny. Don't lower your frequency to explain your freedom. Don't let old voices pull you back into old versions of yourself. You are not defined by where you fell. You are defined by the fact that you rose. Every scar on your soul tells a story of survival. Every chapter they use to shame you, heaven uses to shape you. The opinions of people will fade, but the work you've done to heal will stand. So walk boldly, speak softly, forgive deeply, and let your peace do the talking. You are not who they remember. You are who you've become. When they bring up your past, look them in the eye and smile, because that's no longer your address. You've moved on. You've grown. You've built peace where pain once lived. And that's the ultimate victory: to be unrecognizable to your past and unstoppable in your purpose.